Welcome to After Dark Horrors, where the mundane becomes menacing and the ordinary transforms into something extraordinary. I'm your host, and tonight we delve into places we've all visited but rarely consider: the neighborhood laundromat. These fluorescent-lit way stations of domesticity hide secrets in their spinning drums and forgotten corners. The stories you're about to hear are submitted by viewers like you. People who experienced something they can't quite explain during the most routine of chores. So grab your favorite blanket, check the locks on your doors, and join us as we explore the 5 most disturbing true laundromat horror stories ever shared with our channel. Before we begin, a quick note to our new viewers: what you're about to experience is crafted to maximize psychological tension without crossing content policy lines. We specialize in atmospheric horror that messes with your mind, not your stomach. If you enjoy this style, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Our community thrives on shared experiences, and we read every submission. Now dim the lights and let's begin with our first tale. Story 1. The Man Who Folded with His Eyes. My name is Alex, and at the time of this story, I was in my final year of university. My life was a caffeine-fueled blur of deadlines, part-time work, and a mounting sleep debt that felt like a physical weight on my shoulders. It was during one of these marathon study sessions at around 3 in the morning that I realized I had absolutely nothing clean to wear for presentation the next day. My dorm building's laundry room was closed, so my only option was the 24-hour Suds-O-Matic a few blocks away. It was a place I usually avoided, a grimy, tile-floored box that always smelled of damp lint and cheap, flowery detergent. The night was cold and bitingly windy. I stuffed a fortnight's worth of clothes into a massive hamper and trudged through the empty streets, the plastic bag digging into my fingers. When I pushed open the heavy glass door of the laundromat, a wave of warm, humid air hit me. The place was deserted, save for one other person. He was an old man, probably in his late 70s or early 80s, sitting on one of the hard plastic benches bolted to the floor. He was meticulously folding a pile of clothes that looked like they had just come out of a dryer. He was thin, almost gaunt, with skin like wrinkled parchment and a shock of white hair combed over a spotted scalp. He wore a simple button-up shirt and slacks that looked as clean and crisp as the clothes he was folding. I didn't think much of him. I just wanted to get my laundry done and get back to my textbooks. I lugged my hamper over to a triple-loader washer in the far corner, the one furthest from the door. I sorted my colors and whites with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done this task 1,000 times. As I poured the detergent, the rhythmic thump-thump swoosh of the old man's folding filled the silence. It was a steady, almost hypnotic sound. I loaded the machine, fed it a handful of quarters, and pressed start. The machine groaned to life, churning the water and clothes into a frothy vortex. With about 40 minutes to kill, I slumped onto a bench opposite the old man, pulled out my phone, and tried to review my notes, but I couldn't focus. My eyes kept drifting over to him. There was something strange about his movements. They were too precise, too perfect. Every t-shirt was folded into an exact identical square. Every pair of jeans was creased with razor-sharp precision. It was the kind of folding you'd see in a high-end retail store, not something a person was doing casually in a deserted laundromat at 3 a.m. I watched him for a solid 5 minutes. He never looked up. He never hesitated. His hands, though gnarled with age, moved with an uncanny fluidity. He'd pick up a towel, give it a sharp snap to flatten it, and then fold it into a perfect rectangle in 3 swift, economical movements. It was mesmerizing, but also deeply unsettling. It was inhuman. And then he did something that made the blood freeze in my veins. He finished folding a small pink t-shirt. He placed it neatly on top of the stack beside him. Then he leaned back slightly, closed his eyes, and reached for the next item, a pillowcase. His hands found it in the basket, lifted it, and began to fold it. His eyes remained shut. I stared, my heart starting to pound against my ribs. This had to be a trick, right? Some kind of party trick? A muscle memory thing? I watched, utterly captivated, as he folded the pillowcase with the same impossible precision. Then a sock, then another t-shirt. His eyes never opened. His face was a placid blank mask. He was folding by touch alone, but it was more than that. It was as if his hands could see. The fluorescent lights above me began to hum, a low, aggravating buzz that seemed to vibrate right through my skull. The air grew thick and heavy. The only sounds were the churning of my washer, the hum of the lights, and the soft, rustling whisper of the old man's hands working the fabric. I felt a primal urge to get up and leave, to just abandon my clothes and run out into the night. But my feet felt like they were bolted to the floor. I was trapped by a morbid curiosity I couldn't explain. My washer finally buzzed, signaling the end of its cycle. The sound was like a gunshot in the suffocating silence. I jumped. The old man didn't react. He just kept folding, his eyes still closed. I forced myself to stand. My legs were shaky. I walked over to my washer, my back to him, feeling his unseen presence like a physical pressure. I opened the door and the smell of wet, clean clothes billowed out. I started transferring them armful by armful into a nearby dryer. With each trip back and forth, I risked a glance over my shoulder. He hadn't moved. He was just a still, folded figure in a world of humming machines. I loaded the last of my clothes, fed the dryer its quarters, and started it. The drum began to tumble, a new, deeper rhythm joining the laundromat symphony of strange noises. I went back to my bench, but I didn't sit. I couldn't. I stood, pretending to check my phone, but in reality, I was watching him, waiting. He had a small pile of clothes left in his basket. He folded the last of them, a pair of gray sweatpants, with his eyes still closed. He placed the perfectly folded pants on top of the now towering stack. Then he opened his eyes. The movement was slow, deliberate. And when his eyes were open, they seemed to look right through me. They were a pale, watery blue, and they held no discernible emotion. No curiosity, no malice, nothing. They were just empty. He looked at his stack of clothes, then at the empty basket, then at me. A slow, faint smile spread across his lips. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile of profound, unsettling satisfaction. He stood up, his joints making no sound. He picked up his stack of clothes, it was so perfectly folded it didn't shift or sag, and walked towards the door. He didn't use a cart or a bag. He just carried the stack in his arms like a block of stone. He pushed open the door and stepped out into the night. Without a backward glance, I stood there for a long moment, just breathing. The tension in my shoulders slowly began to ease. It was over. He was gone. It was weird, sure, but it was over. I let out a long, shaky laugh at my own fear. I was just tired, stressed out. My imagination was running wild. My dryer buzzed. I walked over, pulled open the door, and started pulling out my warm, dry clothes. I was stuffing them into my hamper when I saw it. Sitting on top of the dryer, right where the old man's stack of clothes must have been, was a single, perfectly folded t-shirt. It was gray. My gray university t-shirt, the one I was certain I had put in the wash. I picked it up. It was still warm, as if it had just been folded. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that it was folded into a perfect identical square, the same impossible, inhuman precision as the old man's laundry. I had never been able to fold a t-shirt like that in my life. I dropped it as if it had burned me. I frantically stuffed the rest of my clothes into the hamper, leaving the folded t-shirt behind, and ran out of that laundromat without looking back. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat in my dorm room, the lights on, jumping at every shadow. The next day I wore dirty clothes to my presentation. I never went back to the Suds-O-Matic, but the story doesn't end there. A week later, I was doing laundry in my dorm's clean, well-lit facility. I was pulling my clothes from the dryer when I found it. Tucked inside the sleeve of a sweatshirt was a single gray t-shirt, my gray university t-shirt, and it was folded into a perfect, identical square. I don't know how it got there. I don't know what the man in the laundromat was, but I know he found me. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm trying to sleep, I can still hear the soft, rustling whisper of fabric being folded, and I feel the weight of those empty, watery eyes watching me from the darkness. I threw the shirt away, but I still feel its presence, a neat, square-shaped hole in my reality. Story 2. The chittering in the dryer. My name is Sarah, and I'm a single mother to a wonderful, chaotic 7-year-old named Leo. Life is a beautiful, exhausting whirlwind of school runs, packed lunches, and a never-ending pile of laundry. Our apartment building's laundry machines are terrible, small, expensive, and often broken. So once a month, I'd load up my car with every piece of dirty linen we owned and make a pilgrimage to Wash World, a massive 24-hour laundromat on the other side of town. It was a chore I dreaded, but it was a necessary evil. This particular trip was on a Sunday afternoon. The place was, as usual, packed. A cacophony of buzzing, beeping, and whirring machines filled the air, mixed with the chatter of other families and the blare of a TV mounted in the corner showing some daytime talk show. I managed to snag 3 washers side by side and began the arduous process of sorting and loading. Leo, bless his heart, was helping by pushing stray dryer sheets around the floor with a toy car. I got everything washing and settled in with a coffee and a magazine, letting Leo play in a small, designated kids area in the corner. 45 minutes later, the washers were done. The real challenge began: finding enough dryers. I had to use the ones at the very back of the laundromat, the oldest, most beat-up models they had. They were the kind with the small, round glass doors on the front that looked like portholes on a rusty ship. One of them in particular looked grim. It had a large dent in the side, and the glass was cloudy with a film of old soap scum. But it was the last one available, so I took it. I loaded it with a heavy batch of Leo's jeans, hoodies, and towels. It was a tight fit. I had to really cram the last of the clothes in before I could shut the door. I fed the machine what felt like a dozen quarters, turned the big, clunky knob to high heat, and pushed start. The machine shuddered to life with a loud, rumbling groan. I went back to my station and started folding the clothes from the first load. About 10 minutes went by. Over the general din of the laundromat, I started to hear a new sound. It was coming from the direction of the old dryer. It was a faint ticking sound, like a hard-heeled shoe tapping on a tile floor. Tick, 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 in a steady rhythm, perfectly in time with the tumbling of the drum. I dismissed it. It was probably just a zipper on a pair of jeans or the buckle on a belt. I kept folding, but the sound persisted, and it started to change. The ticking became faster, more erratic. It wasn't a metallic sound anymore. It was sharper, more skittering, like a mouse running on a wheel. Skitter, skitter, skitter. I put down the shirt I was folding and listened, trying to isolate the sound from the noise of the room. It was definitely coming from my dryer. A knot of unease began to form in my stomach. I told myself I was being silly. It was a toy. Leo had a plastic dinosaur or a toy car with hard plastic wheels that I'd missed. That was all. I walked over to the dryer and pressed my ear against the cool metal. The skittering was louder now. It wasn't just one sound. It sounded like dozens of tiny things all moving at once, and underneath it there was a new sound, a faint high-pitched chittering, like the sound a large insect makes, a cockroach or a cricket. But it was wrong. The rhythm was too complex, too intelligent. My heart started to beat a little faster. I looked through the cloudy porthole. All I could see was a blur of blue denim and green towels tumbling over and over. I couldn't see anything else. I told myself to stop being ridiculous. It was an old machine. It was probably just making weird noises. I had a load of wet clothes waiting, and I couldn't waste time and money on another dryer. I went back to my folding, but I couldn't concentrate. My eyes kept darting back to the old machine. The chittering seemed to be getting louder, more insistent. It was a sound that seemed to bypass the ears and go straight to the base of the skull. It was the sound of something alive, something trapped, and something angry. A few minutes later, the sound escalated again. The skittering became a frantic scrabbling. The chittering became a series of sharp, clicking snaps, and then the dryer started to bang. Thump, thump, thump. It was a heavy rhythmic sound, as if something inside was throwing itself against the door of the drum. People were starting to look over now. A woman at the next table gave me a concerned look. I felt my face flush with embarrassment. I smiled weakly and shrugged, as if to say, "Crazy old machines, right?" But inside, I was panicking. I stood up and walked over to the dryer. The banging was violent. The whole machine was shaking. Thump! Thump! Scrabble, scrabble, thump. I could hear the clothes inside being torn. I saw a flash of dark blue against the glass as a pair of Leo's jeans was slammed against the porthole. I had to stop it. I reached for the big red knob, my hand trembling. Just as my fingers touched the cool metal, the banging stopped. The machine went silent. The only sound was the low hum of the heating element. I froze. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the noise. I stood there for a full minute, just staring at the machine. I slowly leaned forward and peered through the glass. The clothes were still, but the glass was fogged up, not with steam, but with a strange, thin, oily film. And as I watched, a dark shape scurried across the inside of the glass. It was too fast to see clearly, but it was big, bigger than a mouse. It was long and segmented with too many legs. I stumbled back, a small gasp escaping my lips. I hit the large red emergency stop button on the wall next to the dryers. A loud alarm began to blare, and every machine in the laundromat ground to a halt. The sudden, deafening silence was broken only by the shrieking alarm and the startled cries of the other patrons. An attendant, a bored-looking teenager with a name tag that said Kevin, came jogging out from behind the counter. Whoa, what's going on? Everything okay? That one, I said, pointing a shaking finger at the old dryer. There's something in there. Kevin rolled his eyes. Lady, it's a dryer. Sometimes stuff makes noise. You probably had a shoe in there. No, I said, my voice trembling. It was alive. I saw it, he sighed, clearly annoyed. He walked over to the machine, fumbled with his keys, and unlocked the door. Look, there's nothing in here. It's just your clothes. He pulled the handle and swung the heavy metal door open. The smell hit me first. It was a foul, acrid stench, like burnt plastic and rotting meat. It made my eyes water. Kevin recoiled, his nose wrinkled in disgust. Whoa, what did you wash in here? I peered into the drum. My clothes were inside, but they weren't just clothes anymore. They were in tatters. Leo's jeans were shredded into ribbons. His favorite green hoodie was torn to pieces. The towels were frayed and unraveling. It looked like a pack of wild animals had been locked in there with them, and sitting on top of the pile of ruined fabric, perfectly still, was one of Leo's toy dinosaurs, a plastic velociraptor. It was snapped clean in half. Kevin stared into the drum, his annoyance replaced by a look of genuine confusion. I don't get it. How did that happen? I didn't have an answer. All I could do was stare at the destruction. There was no sign of the creature I had seen. No hole, no body, nothing. But as I looked closer, I saw something. Tucked into a seam of one of the shredded towels was a single, dark, iridescent scale. It was about the size of my thumbnail, and it shimmered with an oily, rainbow sheen like a beetle's wing. I didn't say anything about the scale. I just silently, numbly, scooped the ruined clothes into my basket. I had to go home and tell my son that his favorite hoodie was gone. I had to throw away almost an entire load of laundry. But the material loss was nothing. The real damage was the knowledge that somewhere in the dark, tumbling heat of an old dryer, something had been born, or had hatched, and I was the one who had put it there. Sometimes, late at night, I think I can still hear that faint, high-pitched chittering, and I wonder where it went. I wonder if it's still in the walls of that laundromat, waiting for another load of clothes to incubate in, or if it found its way out. I check my own dryers at home twice now, before and after every cycle. I'm always looking for that oily film on the glass, always listening for that skittering sound in the dark. I still have that scale hidden in a small box in my closet, a terrible, shimmering reminder of the day I did the laundry and unleashed something I can't name and can't ever forget. Story 3, The Lost and Found Box. I have a confession to make. I'm a finder, not in a professional treasure hunting way, but in a more mundane, slightly shameful way. I find things, lost keys, dropped earrings, a single perfect feather on the sidewalk, and I have a compulsion to pick them up. My apartment is filled with a curated collection of other people's forgotten moments. It's not theft, I tell myself. It's preservation, giving these lost objects a home. This habit of mine is what drew me to the Lost and Found box at The Final Spin, a laundromat I used to frequent. It wasn't a box, really, but an old wooden crate tucked away in a dusty corner behind a vending machine. It was always overflowing with the detritus of forgotten laundry days, single socks, unmatched gloves, faded receipts, sunglasses with a broken arm, and a truly impressive assortment of spare change. Every time I did my laundry, I would make a pilgrimage to that box. I'd rummage through it, my fingers sifting through the lint-covered debris, feeling that familiar thrill of discovery. I never took anything big, just small, insignificant things. A button with an interesting design, a key to a lock I'd never find, a brightly colored hair tie. It was my secret ritual. One Tuesday evening, the laundromat was particularly quiet. A soft rain was falling outside, streaking the big front window. The only other people were an elderly couple reading a newspaper together. The hum of the machines was a low, soothing drone. It was the perfect atmosphere for a little exploration. I finished loading my washers and made my way to the corner. The crate seemed to be overflowing more than usual. As I knelt down, I felt a strange pull, a magnetic attraction that was stronger than usual. It was as if the box was calling to me. I reached in, my hands brushing against the familiar textures of forgotten things. But this time, something felt different. As my fingers closed around a small, smooth gray stone, a jolt went through me. It wasn't an electric shock, but a mental one. A flash of an image filled my mind. A gray, pebbly beach, the sound of crashing waves, the feeling of cold water on my feet. I had never been to that beach. I didn't recognize it. I dropped the stone as if it were hot. I shook my head, trying to clear the image. It was just my imagination, I told myself. A trick of the light. But my heart was pounding. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the crate. The compulsion was still there, but now it was mixed with a deep sense of unease. I should have just walked away. I should have gone back to my seat and waited for my laundry. But I didn't. I reached back in. This time, my fingers found a small silver locket. It was heart-shaped and intricately carved. The moment I touched it, another wave of images flooded my mind. The smell of lavender, the sound of a woman laughing, the feeling of a warm hand in mine. A wave of intense, overwhelming sadness washed over me, a grief so profound it brought tears to my eyes. It wasn't my sadness. It was someone else's. I snatched my hand back, breathing heavily. What was happening? This wasn't just my imagination. These things, they were holding memories. They were imprinted with the emotions of their owners. I should have stopped. I knew I should have stopped. But the finder in me, The curious, obsessive part of my soul had to know more. I had to understand. I began to rummage more deliberately, my hands trembling. I picked up a child's mitten and was hit with a flash of pure, unadulterated joy. The feeling of swinging high in a park, the taste of an ice cream cone, a mother's voice singing a lullaby. I found a single tarnished earring and was filled with a sharp, stabbing pang of regret. A heated argument, the slam of a door. The bitter taste of words that couldn't be unsaid. Each object was a key, unlocking a door into a stranger's life. I was a voyeur, experiencing their most intimate moments, their deepest joys and sorrows. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. And then, at the very bottom of the crate, my fingers brushed against something hard and leathery. A book. I pulled it out. It was a small, journal-sized book bound in dark red leather. There was no title on the cover. It was cool to the touch, and it felt strangely heavy, as if it was weighted with more than just paper and ink. I opened it. The first page was filled with elegant looping cursive. It was a diary entry dated October 12th. I lost my favorite scarf today. The blue one with the little anchors. I think I left it at the laundromat. I hope someone finds it. It was a gift. I flipped to the next page. The handwriting was different. Messier, more frantic. November 3rd, I can't find my wedding ring. I took it off to do the dishes, and now it's gone. I've torn the house apart. I feel sick. What am I going to tell him? I kept flipping. Page after page, entry after entry. Each one was written in a different hand, describing a different lost item. A lost key, a lost wallet, a lost child's toy, a catalog of loss. But as I read further, the entries began to change. They started to mention the box itself. December 1st, I found this box today, tucked away in the corner. I was just looking for my other glove, but then I found this journal. It's full of stories. Just like mine, I feel less alone. January 20th. I come here every week now, just to read, to add my own story. I lost my job today. I feel like I've lost a part of myself. Writing it down here, putting it in the box. It feels like I'm giving the sadness away. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a lost and found. It was a repository of sorrow. A place where people came to offload their pain, to leave their negative emotions behind with their lost possessions. And I had been dipping my hands into it, soaking it all up. I flipped to the last page. It was blank except for a single entry at the very bottom. The handwriting was neat, precise, and chillingly familiar. It was my own handwriting. I hadn't written it. But there it was, February 14th. I came in tonight. The rain is making the windows weep. I feel the box calling me. I found a stone, a locket, a mitten. I felt their lives, their joys, their pain. It's overwhelming. I think I understand now. The box doesn't just take, it gives. It gives you a story. And now it's my turn to leave one. I wonder what the next person will find when they read this. I stared at the page, my mind reeling. It was a prophecy, a trap. I looked up from the journal. The laundromat was silent. The elderly couple was gone. The rain had stopped. The only sound was the low hum of the washing machines. And then I heard it. A soft whisper right behind my ear. What will you leave behind? I screamed and dropped the journal. I scrambled to my feet, my heart hammering against my ribs. I spun around. There was no one there. The corner was empty, just the dusty crate and the humming vending machine. I didn't wait for my laundry. I didn't even grab my basket. I ran. I ran out of that laundromat and into the empty, rain-slick street, and I didn't stop until I got home. I never went back to the final spin. I threw away all the little trinkets I had collected over the years. I tried to break my habit, to resist the urge to pick up every lost thing I saw. But it's hard. Because the box is still with me, it's not in the laundromat anymore. It's in my head. I find things now, and when I pick them up, I don't just see images. I hear whispers. I feel the weight of strangers' lives pressing down on me. I left a part of myself in that box. and in return, it gave me a curse. I am no longer just a finder. I am a keeper of lost stories, lost memories, and lost souls. And I'm afraid that one day, my own story will be the only one left to tell. Story 4. The Attendant with the Coin. I've been a creature of habit my entire life. I like routine. I like predictability. For the past 10 years, every Saturday morning, I have done my laundry at the same place, the Clean Getaway. It's a small, family-owned laundromat, always spotless, with the same row of pastel-colored machines and the same faint smell of lemon-scented bleach. And for the past 10 years, there has been the same attendant, a man named Silas. Silas is as much a part of the laundromat as the washers and dryers themselves. He's a tall, lanky man, probably in his 60s, with a stooped posture and a head of thinning, graying hair. He always wears the same thing, a short-sleeved button-up shirt, beige slacks, and a small, neatly pressed apron. He's a man of few words. He usually just sits on his high stool behind the counter, reading a newspaper or silently watching the small bank of security monitors. He's always been there, rain or shine, holiday or weekend. Silas is a constant, a fixture. For years our interaction was minimal, a nod, a good morning, the exchange of a roll of quarters for a $20 bill. But about a year ago that changed. I was doing my usual load and I came up 1 quarter short for the last dryer. I was annoyed with myself. I checked my pockets, my wallet, the bottom of my laundry basket. Nothing. I walked up to the counter, feeling a little foolish. "Hey, Silas," I said, "any chance I could trade $1 for 4 quarters? I'm short 1 for the dryer." Silas slowly lowered his newspaper. He looked at me, his pale gray eyes unreadable. He didn't say a word. He just reached under the counter and pulled out a small black velvet pouch. He loosened the drawstring and tipped a single coin into his palm. He held it out to me. It wasn't a quarter. It was a coin, about the same size, but it was made of a dark, heavy metal that wasn't copper or silver. It was almost black, with a dull, non-reflective surface. On one side, there was a strange geometric symbol I didn't recognize, a spiral within a circle. On the other side, there was just a smooth, blank face. "Oh, that's okay," I said, a little unnerved. "I'll just run to my car for some change." Silas didn't move. He just kept his hand outstretched, the coin resting in his palm. "The final spin requires a toll," he said. His voice was a dry, raspy whisper, like the sound of leaves skittering across pavement. It was the first time I'd heard him say more than 2 words at once. I didn't know what to do. I felt a strange pressure to take the coin. It was just a coin, right? A weird token or something. I didn't want to be rude. I reached out and took it. It was incredibly cold. Not just cold, like a piece of metal that's been in an air-conditioned room, but a deep, penetrating cold that seemed to suck the warmth right out of my fingertips. I quickly dropped it into the dryer's coin slot. The machine accepted it without a problem. I turned to thank Silas, but he had already raised his newspaper, effectively ending the conversation. I didn't think much of it after that. It was just a weird little interaction, but it happened again a few weeks later, and again a month after that. It became a strange, unspoken ritual. I would always be short 1 quarter for the last machine, and Silas would always produce one of those strange, dark coins from his velvet pouch. He would always say, in that same dry whisper, "The final spin requires a toll." And I would always take it, always feel that unnerving, deep cold, and always try to forget about it as soon as I left. But I started to notice things. I started to notice the other people who took the coin. There was a young woman who used to come in every week, always cheerful, always listening to music on her headphones. One day I saw her take a coin from Silas. The next week she was back. But she was different. She was quiet. She didn't have her headphones. She just sat staring at the floor, her shoulders slumped. The week after that, she was gone. I never saw her again. There was an old man who used to come in and chat with everyone, telling long, rambling stories about his days in the Navy. He took a coin one day. The next time I saw him, he didn't say a word to anyone. He just moved his clothes from the washer to the dryer with a slow, shuffling gait, his eyes vacant. He became a ghost in the machine. I started to feel a creeping dread. The laundromat, my place of comforting routine, began to feel like a place of quiet, subtle predation. I started watching Silas more closely. I watched him hand out the coins. I watched the people who took them, and I watched them change. They became quieter, more withdrawn. The light in their eyes seemed to dim. It was as if something was being drained out of them. One night, my curiosity got the better of me. I went home and tried to research the symbol on the coin. I spent hours online, searching through occult websites, forums on ancient currencies, and pages of esoteric symbolism. I finally found it on a digitized scan of an old grimoire-like text. The symbol was associated with a concept called anima taxatio, the soul tax. It was a form of spiritual currency, used in forgotten rituals to pay for passage or to bind a person's will to another entity. The text was vague and full of warnings, but the core idea was clear. The coin wasn't just a token. It was a contract, a payment. The next Saturday I was terrified. I didn't want to go to the laundromat, but my routine, my ingrained habits were too strong. I had to go. I was determined not to be short a quarter. I brought a $10 roll of quarters with me. I was not going to take that coin. I did my laundry, my hands shaking as I loaded the machines. I avoided looking at Silas. I could feel his eyes on me, a palpable weight on the back of my neck. I finished my last load and carried it to the dryers. I had my roll of quarters ready. I put the clothes in and I started feeding the machine. 1 quarter, 2, 3, 4. I was done. I had paid my own toll. I let out a sigh of relief. I had broken the cycle. As I turned to walk back to my seat, I heard a soft rustle behind me. I froze. I slowly turned around. Silas was standing there. He had left his counter. He was holding one of the dark coins between his thumb and forefinger. He wasn't holding it out to me. He was just looking at it. "You did not pay the toll," he whispered. His voice seemed to echo in the suddenly silent laundromat. The hum of the machines had faded to a low, almost inaudible thrum. I did, I stammered, holding up my roll of quarters. "I paid with my own money." He shook his head slowly, a sad, almost pitying expression on his face. "That is not the toll. That is for the machine. The toll is for the spin, the final spin, the one that cleans what the soap cannot." He took a step towards me. The air grew thick and cold. The fluorescent lights above us began to flicker erratically, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. "Every cycle has a cost," he rasped, his eyes fixed on mine. His gray eyes seemed to swirl, to deepen into dark, vortex-like pools. "A residue is left behind, a memory, a fear, a regret. The toll, it washes that away. It keeps the machine clean." "It keeps you clean." He held the coin out to me again. The deep cold radiated from it, washing over me in a wave. "You have accumulated a great deal of residue. It is time to pay." I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. "No, get away from me." I turned and ran. I didn't grab my laundry. I didn't grab my basket. I just ran for the door. As I fumbled with the handle, I heard him whisper one last time, his voice seeming to come from everywhere at once. The toll is always paid, one way or another. I burst out of the laundromat and into the bright Saturday morning sun. I didn't stop running until I was blocks away. I never went back. I found a new laundromat, one that was impersonal and sterile, with a high turnover of teenage employees. But I'm not free. I know that now. I see the world differently now. I see the tolls everywhere, the small, unnoticed payments we make with our attention, our energy, our emotions. I see the people who have paid the toll, their eyes dim, their wills sapped. And sometimes, late at night, when my own dryer is finishing its cycle, I'll hear a soft clink from inside the drum, the sound of a coin dropping into the collection tray. And I know that Silas is still out there, collecting his toll. And I'm afraid that one day he'll come to collect mine. Story 5, The Final Load. My name is Mark, and I'm an investigative journalist for a small online publication that specializes in the strange and unexplained. Ghosts, cryptids, conspiracy theories, I've looked into them all. Most of it is nonsense, easily debunked. But every now and then, I stumble upon a story that sticks with me, a story that has a kernel of something truly unsettling. The story of the Suds and Such Laundromat was one of those. It was a local legend in a rundown industrial town on the outskirts of the city. The stories were always vague and contradictory, but they shared a common thread. People who went there, especially late at night, sometimes didn't come back. Or if they did, they were different. The place had been shut down for years, a boarded-up relic with a faded sign. It was the perfect subject for a deep dive. I spent weeks researching. I dug through old newspaper articles, property records, and town archives. I found police reports on missing persons that all had one thing in common. Their last known location was the Suds and Such. The reports were all closed, citing lack of evidence or presumed runaway. It was a conspiracy of silence, a town-wide amnesia. I knew I had to go there. I had to see it for myself. I went on a cold, clear night in the middle of the week. The moon was full, casting a silver glow over the decaying industrial park. The laundromat was a squat, cinder-block building, its windows boarded up with plywood. The front door was secured with a heavy chain and a padlock, but I had come prepared. A pair of bolt cutters made short work of the lock. The door groaned open, releasing a puff of stale, musty air. The smell was a complex cocktail of dampness, mold, and something else. Something acrid and chemical like ozone. I switched on my heavy-duty flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a scene of frozen decay. The washers and dryers were still there, lined up in neat rows like a silent metal army. They were covered in a thick layer of dust, and rust bloomed on their seams like a strange, metallic fungus. The floor was littered with debris, discarded detergent boxes, old magazines, and a scattering of lost, lint-covered socks. It was a ghost town of domesticity. I began to explore, my camera flash popping intermittently, documenting the scene. The place was eerily quiet. The only sound the crunch of my boots on the gritty floor and the faint hum of the flashlight. As I made my way to the back of the laundromat, I noticed something strange. The machines weren't arranged randomly. They were set up in a large, perfect circle, all facing inward. In the center of the circle was a single, massive machine. It was an industrial-sized washer-dryer combo, far larger than any of the others. It was made of a dark, non-reflective metal, and it had no brand name, no markings of any kind. It looked less like a piece of laundry equipment and more like a sarcophagus. Next to this central machine was a door marked private. I tried the handle. It was unlocked. I pushed it open and found myself in a small office. It was surprisingly neat. A metal desk, a swivel chair, and, most importantly, A filing cabinet! My heart started to pound. This was it? This was the jackpot. I pulled open the top drawer of the filing cabinet. It was filled with manila folders, each one labeled with a name and a date. I pulled one out. The name was Emily R. The date was from 10 years ago. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a customer intake form, but the fields were bizarre. Instead of name and address, it had fields like primary emotional state, core, regret, and level of residue. Under primary emotional state, someone had written grief. Under core regret, they had written not saying goodbye. I pulled out another folder. David S. Primary emotional state, fear, core regret at cowardice. Another. Maria L. Primary emotional state, anger, core regret, betrayal. I was looking at a catalog of human suffering. These weren't laundry records. They were psychological profiles. I opened the bottom drawer of the cabinet. It was filled with small black velvet pouches, just like the ones described in one of the stories I'd researched. I opened one. Inside was a single dark, heavy coin, marked with a spiral within a circle. Suddenly, I heard a sound from the main room, a soft clink. I froze, my blood running cold. I wasn't alone. I slowly and quietly closed the filing cabinet drawer. I switched off my flashlight, plunging the office into darkness. I crept to the door and peered out through a small crack. Standing in the center of the circle of machines, next to the large central unit, was a figure. It was a tall, lanky man in a beige uniform. Silas, the attendant from the stories. He looked exactly as he had been described. He was holding a small metal tray, and he was methodically placing the dark coins onto it, one by one. The clinking sound I had heard was the coins hitting the tray, but he wasn't alone. Standing silently, spaced evenly around the circle of machines, were other people. They were all staring forward, their faces blank, their eyes vacant. I recognized them from the missing persons files I had studied. The young woman, the old man, the teenage boy. They were here. They were the ones who hadn't come back. Or maybe they had, but as this... Silas finished collecting his coins and placed the tray on top of the central machine. He then turned to the assembled group. "The cycle is complete," he said, his dry whisper carrying easily in the silent room. "The residue has been collected. The toll has been paid. The machine is ready for the final load." He walked over to the large central machine and placed his hand on a panel on its side. The machine hummed to life, a low guttural vibration that I felt in the floorboards. A seam appeared on the front of the machine, and a large round door, like a bank vault, began to slowly swing open. There was no light inside, just a deep, profound, absolute darkness. A darkness that seemed to absorb the light from my surroundings. A cold, airless chill emanated from the opening. Silas turned his head, and his pale gray eyes seemed to look directly at the crack in the office door where I was hiding. A slow, thin smile spread across his face. "We have a guest," he said, his voice echoing slightly. "One who has not paid his toll." The vacant-eyed figures all turned their heads in unison, their faces all aimed at the office door. The movement was synchronized, inhuman. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. Panic seized me. I fumbled for the doorknob, threw the door open, and ran. I didn't look back. I could hear the shuffling footsteps of the figures behind me, their movements unnervingly fast. I sprinted through the maze of machines, knocking over a cart of detergent, the plastic bottles clattering to the floor. I scrambled over a fallen dryer, my lungs burning. I burst out of the front door and into the cold night air. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I peeled out of the parking lot, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. I drove for hours, putting as much distance between myself and that town as possible. I have the files. I have the photos. I have the proof. But who would believe me? It sounds insane. A laundromat that harvests human emotion? An attendant who collects a soul tax? It's the stuff of nightmares. I'm writing this story now as a warning not to trust the mundane, not to take the everyday for granted, because you never know what's hiding behind the faded sign of a local business, or what the true cost of a final spin might be. I'm safe for now, but I'm a changed man. I can't look at a washing machine without feeling a sense of dread. I can't hear the hum of a dryer without my heart skipping a beat. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still see that dark, open doorway in the center of the room, and I can feel that cold, airless chill beckoning me forward, inviting me to take my place in the final load. The cycle is always waiting, and it's always hungry. The spin cycle is complete. The stories are told, the stains are washed away, but the impressions they leave remain. These accounts, from the man who folded with his eyes to the final load itself, serve as a chilling reminder that the veil between our world and the next is often at its thinnest in the places we least expect. The next time you find yourself in a laundromat late at night, surrounded by the rhythmic hum and tumble of the machines, listen closely. You might hear more than just the spin of the drum. You might hear the echoes of a story waiting to be told. A special thank you to those who bravely shared their experiences with us. If you have a story of your own, a place where the ordinary became extraordinary, reach out. You can find our submission link in the description below. Be sure to like and subscribe for more tales from the shadows, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support helps keep these stories alive and ensures the darkness never goes unnoticed. Until next time, stay vigilant and trust your instincts. I'm your host, signing off from After Dark Horrors. Remember, some things don't come out in the wash.